Summer has a strange kind of sunset. It makes everything seem suspended between two moments, like the light is hesitating whether to stay or disappear. Back then, I always thought of summer sunsets as the most pleasant time of day. The cicadas chirping quieter, the air still hot but less fierce, the sky painted in soft yellows and a touch of orange. But after the summer of my 16th year, I never saw sunsets the same way again, because it was right at that moment when the world stood between light and dark that I met him, a man who didn't say anything, didn't do anything, didn't touch me. He just stood there, just waiting, and the feeling of being waited on by someone, even if you don't know what they want, is the worst fear a child can carry for the rest of his life. In 2009, I lived on the edge of a small Texas town where everything was dry, hot, and under a sky so vast you could see the clouds drifting by from morning to night without obstruction. My house was next to a small oak forest. No one tended it, no clear fence, just spontaneous trails made by people and animals. I used to run at sunset every day, a simple habit, a little thing I liked, because it gave me a sense of privacy in the middle of a boring life. But that summer, when the sunset looked its best, I found I was no longer running alone. That evening, I ran as usual, headphones on low, my feet crunching against the dry leaves. The air began to cool, the smell of earth and sap mixed with the light, making the forest look like a painting tinged with gold. As I approached a small turn between two large oak trees, I noticed there was someone ahead, just a figure leaning against a tree, head tilted slightly, arms hanging down. I slowed down and squinted. A man, around 40 or 50, wearing a dark brown long-sleeved shirt, the thick fabric farmers wear in winter. But it was 34 degrees Celsius. He stood so still I thought I was looking at a mannequin set up in the woods. As I ran past, I said, "Hello, uncle." No reaction, no glance, no movement. I could hear my heart beating louder than my footsteps. When I was about 4 or 5 meters away from him, I felt as if someone was watching my every move, as if behind the hair covering my face was a fixed gaze on the back of my neck. I picked up speed and headed straight home. I thought, it's strange, just a stranger, but my heart knew something was wrong. The next day I didn't run into the woods. I ran around the house farther, hotter, but safer. But when I got closer to the road that led into the woods, I saw him standing between two trees, about 200 meters from the edge of the woods, not moving, not changing position, not exactly looking at me, but his body felt like it was leaning toward me, like it was waiting. The sunset was orange. Everything had long shadows, but he didn't have a shadow. It was like his body didn't belong to the light. I stood still for a few seconds, then walked straight home, trying to appear normal in front of the others. That night I told my parents. Dad said he might be a vagrant. Mom told me not to walk alone at night. But I noticed my dad wasn't smiling. He didn't think it was a small matter. On the third day, I decided to face my fear. I went back to the forest path even though my mind kept telling me not to. The first steps were normal. The faint sound of cicadas, the rustling of grass. Everywhere I looked, I saw only summer forest. I ran to the turn, looked around, no one. I relaxed a little, feeling like I had just escaped a nightmare. But only a few seconds later, when I looked straight down the path, there he was, about 30 meters away, appearing as if he had been standing there for hours without me seeing him. His whole body was turned toward me. His face was slightly tilted up, his hair partially covering his face, and still, he didn't move. I stood there, frozen. I wanted to run, but my body wouldn't listen. The sunset cast a golden glow on his face, making his brown shirt look like damp earth. But what paralyzed me was his face, or what should have been a face. He had no eyes, no nose, no ears, just a flat surface, like a real leather mask, stretched so far that all features had disappeared. There was a thin crack in the middle of it, like a crack in porcelain. The crack opened, slowly, like two edges of skin being gently pulled aside. No sound, no teeth, no flesh, just a dark area so deep I felt it was sucking the light around me. I backed away, my palms sweaty. He didn't move. He didn't raise his hand. He didn't move. He just stood there, staring at me through that darkness, waiting for me to get closer, waiting for me to lock eyes with him long enough, waiting for me to make a mistake. I turned and ran. I ran until I couldn't breathe. I didn't look back. I didn't let any thoughts enter my mind except don't let it get close. I had never run so fast before. I stopped running from that day on, but it didn't end there. He started appearing in other places, always around sunset. Once when I was at the supermarket with my mother, he was standing at the edge of the parking lot, between two trucks, motionless. Another time I saw him standing across the street, right next to the stop sign. When I was at a friend's house, he was standing by the back fence, never close, never too far, always at a distance where I could confirm it was him, but no one else could see. My mother began to panic. My father was quiet, thinking about something he didn't want to say. One evening, I found him sitting on the porch, looking toward the woods as if he were reminiscing about something very old. I sat down next to him. The wind was hot, but he was still shivering as if he were cold. After a long while, he asked, "You saw him, right?" I was stunned. "Dad, do you know who he is?" He shook his head. "Nobody knows. Just, he's not human, and you should never go near him." I asked in fear, "What does he want?" Dad looked at me, his eyes heavy. "He wants to be seen. Wants someone to acknowledge his existence. Once you look at him too closely, he won't take his eyes off you anymore." I couldn't sleep that night, and what I feared most finally happened. Around 8 p.m., as I was pulling the curtains to the window, I heard a slight rustling in the backyard. Not footsteps, not the sound of falling branches, but the sound of cloth rubbing against each other very slowly, very lightly, as if someone was standing still but their clothes were shaking without any wind. I used my fingers to open the curtains a small crack, and almost fell to the floor. He stood right under my window, about 3 meters away, his head tilted slightly to the left, as if listening to my heartbeat. His arms hung limply, his back was straight and motionless, his face was eyeless. The black crack seemed to have widened. I immediately dropped the curtain, pressed my back against the wall, and my heart was pounding. Not a sound, not a word, no eyes, but I knew he was looking. After more than 20 minutes, the rustling sound disappeared. 3 days later, we moved. Mom said she wanted a change of scenery. Dad was silent. I didn't ask any more questions. Many years later, when I returned to my old town, I walked into a cafe near the forest and asked the elderly owner, "Here, has anyone ever seen a man in the forest at dusk?" He looked at me for so long that I thought he didn't hear. Then he whispered, "You're not the first. But if he ever looks at you, don't come back to that forest. Sunset is when his boundaries are most open." I left the shop, looking out the window toward the forest. Between the gray trees, I swear I saw a figure standing still, head tilted slightly, as if assessing whether I remembered him. I turned away. He didn't look back, not because I was afraid of seeing him, but because I knew, if he looked at him again, he would start waiting for me again. When I was a kid, I always thought of summer as a time of sunshine, of running, of long days free from the constraints of school. But as I got older, I realized summer has its scary silences. Not the scary kind like in horror movies, but the scary of too much silence, of time stretching too long, of a house so old in the middle of an afternoon so hot it shouldn't exist. And in the summer of 2005, in a small town in Oklahoma, I learned that there are houses that know when you're looking at them, and sometimes they look back. My town was poor, small, with red dirt roads running through identical blocks of houses. About 2 miles outside of town, there was an abandoned house that the local kids called the empty house, not because it was empty, but because everything inside seemed to be sucked away. The house had been abandoned since 1989, after the Hartwell's deaths. People said they heard footsteps on the ceiling every night. Others said they were haunted by a feeling of being watched. Some said they saw shadows standing in the hallway at 1 a.m. No one knew what had happened, only that the police had come and taken away 3 black bags. No one had lived there since. But the summer I was 13, my best friend Alex and I decided to go into the house to find something interesting. Kids are stupid like that. That summer was as hot as a stove. The sky was artificially blue. There were no clouds, no wind, and even the steam seemed reluctant to rise. At noon, the dirt road was so hot it burned your hand. But that afternoon, the afternoon we entered the empty house was different. The air was suddenly heavier, thicker, and colder. The sunlight was no longer a harsh yellow but a pale white, like the light in a hospital. We stood in front of the house at 5 p.m. The house was 2 stories high, the wooden walls faded, and the old paint peeled off the windows from the rain and wind. But what made it scary was, all the windows were covered in darkness from the inside, as if not because the light couldn't get in, but because the inside was dark by itself. Ioked. This house looks like it's looking at me, Alex replied, his voice trembling. Yeah, but its eyes look bigger than when I saw them from afar this morning. The inside of the house was so cold that my skin crawled. Not naturally cold, but a kind of motionless cold, like a room that had been closed for 10 years. A musty smell mixed with the smell of rotting wood. Musicadas. No wind, only the creaking of our shoes on the wooden floor. The door closed behind us with a soft click. Alex turned around, trying to smile. Maybe the wind. There was no wind. We turned on our flashlights. The light swept across the long hallway. The wallpaper was old and peeling. There were childish handprints on the wall near the stairs, handprints that looked like someone had dragged their hand along the wall in the dark. What I remember most clearly is, everything in the house seemed to be tilted toward us, not physically, but a feeling. The feeling that the entire space was gently turning toward you, as if you had just entered a stage with the entire audience staring at you. We tried to act normal, and went into the living room. The living room furniture was still in the same place. Torn sofa, rotten wooden table, old TV cabinet. But the thick layer of dust was somehow uneven in the middle of the room. There was less dust, as if someone stood there often. Alex touched the table and whispered, "Hey, why isn't there dust in the middle of the room?" I didn't answer. Something else distracted me even more. There was a tall mirror in the corner, the old kind with a wooden frame. It was as dim as a mirror in a warehouse. When I shone the light on it, it reflected nothing. Not dim, not dirty, but nothing at all. Just a solid gray. We left the living room in silence. The second floor was worse. The stairs creaked with each step. The light became unnaturally dim even though the flashlight was still on. It felt like the wind was breathing very softly on the back of my neck, a lingering chill. The first room on the right had a single window. I shone the light outside. The red light of the late afternoon was shining in, but strangely, it hit the floor, but not the walls. There were no reflections or shadows. Alex stepped back. The sun can't penetrate the wall. I wanted to comfort him, but I couldn't. There was no reason for the light to stop, as if absorbed by something invisible. We continued down the hallway. There was a closed door. The paint was peeling. The wood surface was slightly curved, but in the middle of the door was a thin black streak like a closed eye. I swear that as we got closer, the black streak widened, like an eyelid slowly opening. Alex stepped back. No, I'm not going into this room. But the door opened by itself, slowly, slower than a breath. The room inside was completely dark. As if it wasn't a room, it was a bottomless void. From that darkness, something stepped out. Not a person, not an animal, no clear shape. It was like the darkness had coalesced into a long, thin line, taller than any adult I'd ever seen. It had no legs, no movement, but everything around it seemed to be drawn toward it, as if it were the center of gravity in the room. My flashlight flickered on and then died. The room plunged into total darkness. No sound, no wind, no smoke, just my heartbeat and Alex's breathing. Then another breath, not ours, sounded up ahead. It breathed, as if it wasn't used to using its lungs. When the flashlight flickered back on, I saw. The back wall of the room had two white streaks like open eye holes, not matching the position of the black shadow, as if the real room was looking at us through the darkness. I grabbed Alex's hand and ran. We ran down the stairs, almost falling several times. The main door was tightly closed. The handle was as cold as ice. I couldn't open it. Behind us, the stairs made a sound, not footsteps, but the sound of wood bending, as if a great weight was pressing down on each step. Alex shouted, "Open it, open it." I pounded on the door, and then the door swung open as if someone had pulled it from the outside. We rushed out of the house, running without looking back, not stopping until we were in the middle of the red dirt road. When I looked back, I saw the window on the second floor, the room with two white eye holes. Now, the house was really looking at us. Not a shadow, not a figure, but the house itself, looking through every window, every crack, as if every corner inside was part of the eyes. We never looked back. No one believed the story. Alex moved state the following year because of his parents' divorce. I stayed. As the years passed, I didn't dare go near the dirt road that led to the empty house anymore. But one summer afternoon 2 years ago, when I visited town, I saw someone renovating the house. A new family had moved in. Children were running around in the yard, laughing loudly. The house looked normal in the afternoon sun. Not dark, not cold, not looking back. I approached the fence, talking to the man who had just moved in. "Did you see anything strange in the house?" He smiled. "Nothing, but the room at the end of the second floor hallway. The light didn't get in. It must be the old architecture." I backed away, feeling the blood drain from my face. "Have you ever heard anything in that room?" He frowned. "You mean footsteps?" "Yeah, my wife heard them. They sounded in the evening, like someone walking around the room, slowly, and stopping right behind the door." I looked at the child playing ball in the yard. He kicked the ball onto the front porch. The ball rolled right up to the door. The child ran to pick it up. The door was ajar, cold. The cold air suddenly blew out like it was from inside a freezer. The child looked into the house and asked, "Mommy, is there anyone else in the house?" "I see eyes." I turned away immediately. I didn't wait for an answer, because I knew the empty house didn't care who the new owner was. It was just waiting for someone to get close enough for it to open its eyes completely. And once it did, it wouldn't close them again. In the summer of 2011, the town where I lived had a series of days so hot that the asphalt was soft and covered with shoe prints after just a few minutes in the sun. The strange thing was that in the midst of that heat, the woods north of town were unusually cooler. Not cool from the wind or the shade, but deep cool, like stepping into a cold room with the air conditioning set to the lowest setting. There was a lake in the woods, the locals called Lake Indigo. It was nothing special. Small, still water, covered with maples and pines. But since I was a child, we had an unwritten rule. Don't swim there after sunset. Not because of ghosts or legends, just because no one knew how deep it was. No one had ever touched the bottom. No one had ever measured the depth. And no one understood why its water was always as cold as early winter, even in July. That summer, two friends, Katie and Mason, and I decided to make a little video project to post on YouTube. The idea was simple: explore Lake Indigo at night, the go to the scary style of videos that were all the rage back then. Looking back, it was the dumbest decision of my life. We arrived at the lake at 8:30 p.m. As soon as the sun set, the temperature plummeted from 93 degrees Fahrenheit to 66 degrees Fahrenheit. Frost immediately formed on our hands and the back of our necks. Katie shivered and joked. It felt like someone opened the freezer door. No one responded. We all felt it. The first thing that struck me as unusual was that the water was so dark. Not dark in the way that it reflected the night sky, but dark in the way that there was no color, no light, no anything. When I shined the flashlight, what I saw wasn't ripples or shimmering water. I saw a smooth, non-reflective black surface, like shining a flashlight on matte black paint. "Let's go back," Mason whispered. "This isn't normal." But we were already far away. The sun had completely set, and it would take nearly 30 minutes to get back through the woods. I didn't want to go back in the dark, so we set up camp by the lake, turned on the camera, and started filming. Katie sat next to me, holding the microphone and asking some interview questions for fun. "Are you scared? If there's something in the water, what do you think it is? Why do people avoid this place after 7 o'clock? Mason stood right at the edge of the water, shining the flashlight around, and that's when we saw it. No sound, no ripples. There was no warning. In an instant, a very long, very thin shadow appeared just below the surface of the water, at least 10 feet long. It didn't swim. It didn't float. It stood there, like a stretched human shadow. No head, no arms or legs, just a distorted shape like a black ink stain under the glass. Katie burst into tears. Mason backed away and stumbled. I looked through the camera. The lens was recording nothing, just black. It wasn't a camera error. It wasn't low light. The lens couldn't see the water. It was like it refused to record. We decided to retreat and pack up as quickly as possible. But as Mason pulled his backpack over his shoulder, Katie suddenly cried out, "Why is the water so close?" We turned around. The lake, which had been about 5 meters away, had now moved close to the shore, spilling over the land. But there were no ripples, no movement. It didn't flow like normal water. It came closer, as if the surface of the water itself was sliding toward us. Mason turned on his flashlight and shone it down. Then I realized what was truly terrifying. The lake didn't reflect us. Not unclear, not dim. It didn't reflect anything. A black, dead surface, standing less than half a meter from the tip of my shoe. Katie took my hand and trembled. "It doesn't cast a shadow. Why doesn't it cast a shadow?" I was about to answer when, from the center of the lake, a faint blue light slowly appeared. It wasn't moonlight, because there was no moon. It wasn't a reflection of a flashlight, because the flashlight was still shining down on the dark surface like a hole. It wasn't like light It was like an open eye. Then something else emerged. It didn't make waves. No sound of water, just rising straight up from the black abyss. A head. But that wasn't it. Not a human head. It was like a human head outlined in thick black smoke. Just an outline, no details. Its face was turned straight toward us. No eyes, no mouth, just a darker shade than the surrounding darkness. Katie collapsed and choked. I grabbed Mason's shoulder, but when I turned around, he wasn't there. I looked around, calling his name, screaming at the top of my voice. Katie was sobbing, her hands clutching the ground as if to hold on to something to keep from being dragged away. Then I saw Mason's boot prints right at the edge of the lake, 2 of them, and right next to them, 2 deep craters, like someone had put 2 giant hands in the ground and pulled the body down. I pulled Katie to her feet and we ran for the woods, not daring to look back, not daring to think about Mason, not daring to think about what was following us from the water. We ran until our legs couldn't feel anything, until our breath was choked as if someone was strangling us. Only when the streetlights of the town appeared did I dare to turn around, and saw something that made me throw up right there. Katie's back collar was soaked with lake water, but we never fell in the lake. We never touched the water. I don't know how it got there, and I can't believe it hit the back of her neck. While we were running, the next morning, the police found only Mason's backpack. No body, no tracks, no footprints leading into the water. There was only one thing written in the report. No reflections were found on the lake. I left town a month later. Katie moved state and never mentioned that night again. But sometimes, on hot summer nights, when I look into a puddle, I still see strange shapes under the surface. Not reflections, not shadows, just something looking up. Wait for me to bend down close enough.